Bienvenue à cette représentation du Festival Transamérique. Nous aimerions reconnaître que nous sommes sur un territoire autochtone qui n'a pas été cédé par voie de traité. Berceau de la culture Haudenosaunee, Tiohtià:ke en Kanien'kehá:ka et Munyang en Anishinaabemowin désignent un lieu historique de rencontre entre les premiers peuples, aussi appelé Montréal. Ce théâtre est posé sur des terres qui ont leur propre histoire millénaire et qui, avant la colonisation, accueillaient déjà des récits, des rituels et des représentations. Nous célébrons la vitalité des arts hérités de ces pratiques immémoriales. Merci d'éteindre vos appareils électroniques. Nous vous rappelons qu'il est interdit de filmer ou de prendre des photos. Bon festival!
Welcome to tonight's performance at Festival Transamérique. We acknowledge that we are on indigenous territory that has never been ceded by way of treaty. We are in a place that is the cradle of Haudenosaunee culture, called Tiohtià:ke in Kanien'kehá:ka and Munyang in Anishinaabemowin, that has long been a place of encounter between First Nations. It is now also known as Montreal. This theatre is built on land that has its own history since time immemorial, that already carried its own stories, rituals, and performances before colonization. We are grateful for the vitality and resurgence of the art forms inherited from these ageless practices. Please turn off your electronic devices. We'd also like to remind you that filming and photography are not allowed. Enjoy the festival.
So we are a performance now. That's fantastic. So welcome again at Atelier Montreal. We are here together with 30 festival makers for 7 days to reflect on the role of festivals in today's society. So we are co-organizing this with the festival Transamérique. And today's panel we have Anna Pohribna from the Book Arsenal Festival in Ukraine, Orwa Nyrabia from the International Documentary Festival in Amsterdam, Salim Rajabi from Theatre of the Oppressed, Sheldrick from Global Citizen, and Carmen Olaechea from Fundación Cambio Democrático from Argentina. I hand the floor to Mike, who will facilitate.
So after last night's sky-high 360 degrees view, welcome back to Earth. And maybe just to take this opportunity to wish one of our own a very happy birthday, Shamisa! Woohoo! So this morning we pretty much continuing in the same vein as we did with yesterday's panel, which is about looking at festivals in the context of our contemporary world. And today's theme that we're dealing with in particular is, what does it mean to be a festival or to be an artist or to be an arts practitioner in the context of a contemporary world where we are trying to be in solidarity with other folk who might be experiencing some kind of war, conflicts, repression, marginalization, and the like. So if that's the context for festival making, what does it actually mean practically for us as festival managers, festival makers, curators? And so we are delighted to have this particular panel with us, and we're going to do it pretty much in an alphabetical order. We're going to be starting with Anna, who has a presentation to make, and then each of them will have 10 minutes again to make the presentations, and then we'll invite questions from you folk. So please put on your thinking caps, ask your questions, write them down, and so when we open up, the fantastic panel for you to engage with. Anna, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Hello, everyone. My name is Anna Pohribna. I am Deputy Director for Program Issues at Mistecki Arsenal. It's a National Art and Culture Museum complex in Kyiv, in Ukraine. And I used to work with exhibitions, but now I am responsible for book and literature programs and also for education and digital transformation. And today I will talk mainly about our International Book Arsenal Festival. It's our annual festival, and I will focus on a few examples how we work with contemporary global issues, and then share some very recent cases of solidarity and empathy. So I will share my presentation. Yes, so I hope you see our art arsenal building. So it's a really huge historical building of 18th century. And we are Ukrainian public cultural institution that operates in this historical building. So Mistецький Arsenal integrates and develops various arts, from contemporary art and theater to literature and museum practices. And our mission is to create interactions between people, communities, and institutions that empower the individual and society. So we have our museum collection, and it's a core of our museum activity. Also, we do many exhibition projects that are concentrated on cultural phenomena, some cultural heritage, and also contemporary art projects. For example, in the context of our today's topic, last year we implemented a really great exhibition of contemporary art of Belarus, and it was from us also like a gesture of solidarity to support independent artists and cultural practitioners for Belarus who are standing against the political regime. So these topics of solidarity and empathy are very close to us, but today we are talking about festivals. So I will also focus on our Book Arsenal Festival. It's our annual project, which was founded in 2011. And since then, almost 500,000 well-known international authors from more than 35 countries have been guests of the festival's international program. And every year, about 200 Ukrainian publishers present their publications at the book fair. You can see the festival mission and goals in my presentation, but now I would like to add what makes the Book Arsenal Festival really special. We discussed it many times, and especially during a pandemic when we were trying to reshape the festival format, online, offline, hybrid, all this really good. And we think that the unique atmosphere and interactions between participants and visitors make this festival a favorite event for thousands of Ukrainians and international guests. In 2021, after a year of pause due to the pandemic, the anniversary Book Arsenal Festival returned to offline format with the hashtag Wait for Book Arsenal, Дочекаємось книжкового in Ukrainian, and this hashtag was very popular among our audiences, and we saw their support and their need to be with us, to come every May to Mistецький Arsenal and just to be with us and with other guests. And this physical presence is really important, and offline festivals are really important, and we really miss this atmosphere. But in 2021, there were more than 35,000 on-site visitors and more than 37 online visitors who had an opportunity to watch the festival events online in a free broadcast. And here is some numbers you can see. And I will not talk too long about the festival structure and programs. Usually we have a number of curatorial programs and also some kids and teens program, music program, poetic stage, performative program, and also exhibitions and different visual art projects, professional program for publishers, and the best book design contest. So we are really interdisciplinary festival, and this is really important for us. But every year we choose the festival focus theme, and it's our main intellectual program that usually consists of a number of discussions, but also it works as a cross-cutting theme for the other curators that And they can reflect this focus theme in their curatorial projects and in their exhibitions or performances. Together with the invited curator of the focus theme, we are trying to find or even predict some topics that will be important to reflect on and that will find a response in society. And this year, the migration period was chosen as a focus theme for the 11th Book Arsenal Festival. We announced the focus theme and the curator, Oksana Forostina, in January this year. We have planned to discuss not only the issues of forced migration, but also freedom of movement and nomadic lifestyle, some examples of remote work, migration to the digital world, influence of pandemic and quarantine restrictions. But we did not foresee how processing this topic turned to be and what new meanings will be relevant in already a few months. And this winter, the Book Arsenal team was been working hard to organize the next Book Arsenal Festival in May 2022. But on February 24th, Russia launched a full-scale war against Ukraine. The war continues. Today is the 99th day of the Ukraine's resistance against full-scale Russian aggression. So in April, our team made an obvious but difficult for us decision that Book Arsenal Festival will not take place this year. And we concentrated our efforts on supporting the publishing industry as well as the literary and artistic scene in Ukraine and supporting our community. But in a few weeks ago, we had one of the numerous Zoom calls, and we understood that we are eager to get together again. And we want to reflect on a new dimension of the festival focus. And we want to talk about the great migration that we and the world have been experiencing over the past 3 months. So we decided to organize a public discussion. And it was held on a dates of the planned festival. It happened last week. And we tried to find answers for the current issues of our time. So we saw that the Great Migration has accelerated and has become even more tragic for a much larger part of Ukrainians than 8 years ago, when Russia occupied Crimea and parts of Donbass. And now there are over 6 million refugees who left Ukraine, and estimated 8 million people have been displaced within the country. And more than 1 million Ukrainians were deported to Russia. So we held this public discussion last Saturday. And sorry, I forgot to show these pictures. It was our past festivals. And this picture is from our last event that we held last Saturday. And it was really a very intense and important conversation. Now we have video recording available, and I hope that very soon we will add English subtitles, and everyone who are interested in the situation in Ukraine can watch it on our YouTube channel. And the second and the main part of my speech will be about power of festival to show solidarity and support, and some very recent cases. So, as I told before, from the first days of the war, our team actively works in the areas of informing and advocacy and deepening cooperation with our international partners. On February 24th, in the first day of the war, we published our appeal to international partners. We encouraged our colleagues to share information about the Russian war in Ukraine, to initiate some public statements from industry associations, to provide truthful comments to the international media. But also we asked to share publicly the successful stories of the cooperation with Ukraine, because in the recent years, we and also other Ukrainian organizations had many common projects with foreign partners, and we think it's really important to share these stories and to show that Ukraine achieved really essential progress in arts and literature, cultural diplomacy, and sharing these stories and really important now. And also we encouraged our partners to highlight contemporary Ukrainian art, to discuss Ukrainian books and to invite Ukrainian authors. And we have received many letters of support from our partners, really from the first days of the war. And then we have coordinated very quick and effective communication with book fairs and literary festivals around the world. From the Ukrainian side, we joined a force of Book Arsenal and also of other cultural institutions, among them Ukrainian Book Institute, Ukrainian Institute, Book Forum, International Festival, Pan Ukraine, and also our international partners, international festivals, book festivals, provided the free stands to Ukraine, and meanwhile refusing the participation of Russia. And it was also a very important step because we called our partners to boycott the Russian state and to suspend Russian participation in the international cultural events and cancel cooperation with Russian artists. And we appreciate that many festivals and many associations, and for example, the European Festival Association, they condemn the Russian aggression against Ukraine, and they suspend this cooperation with the aggressor state. Instead, it's really important to strengthen the cultural agency of Ukraine in the world, and to strengthen the Ukrainian voices, and to show both modern Ukrainian culture and the Ukrainian heritage, which Russia seeks to destroy or suppress by starting a war. And as a part of the working group, the Book Arsenal Festival has organized Ukraine's participation in the Bologna Book Fair, in London Book Fair, in Book Fair in Paris, and in Warsaw. For example, at this year's Bologna Children's Book Fair, Ukraine was represented by with an empty manifesto stand. And it was a march, and it was completely impossible to bring books or Ukrainian publishers or writers to Bologna. That's why this stand was empty, but it was like a manifesto for all other visitors and participants. And during the fair, the visitors of the stand had an opportunity to get acquainted with the rights catalogs of Ukrainian publishers. It was also one of our program. It is called Ukrainian Literature Rights On. It's a program that focuses on the promotion of Ukrainian literature and developing connections between Ukrainian publishers and international publishers. And also visitors had a chance to get some information about translation programs of the Ukrainian Book Institute, and to post some photos or videos of the stand using the hashtags Stand with Ukraine and Stop Russian Aggression. So it was first and very important example of this cooperation and solidarity between book festivals. The next one was the London Book Fair.
Sorry,
and
Anna,
yes.
Is it okay to just have about 1 more minute?
Yes, it's okay, because
Sure.
it's just 1 minute is okay.
Good,
So in London we took part in the national stand, and it was focused on the non-fiction books with the motto "Russian war on Ukraine is not fiction but time to act." And then there was Paris and Warsaw. But moreover, now we are working on the Book Arsenal's program participation in the international fairs and festival. And it is a result of a long history of our cooperation with the international book festivals, because usually we had a focus on the international collaboration, and we have special program format like a guest festival, and now Book Arsenal will be a guest festival on a number of international book festivals. For example, we are going to present next week our some events in Prague, and you can see this announcement. And also we develop special program for Copenhagen and for Frankfurt. So I am really convinced that festival can be a change makers, because festival can offer a stage, festivals can strengthen the voices, and they can act in the field of cultural diplomacy. And the basement for this is established international cooperation and some contacts that can work for the future. So common projects and networking events and international programs can help to build these connections and to be integrated into a global context. And then this joint efforts can show this solidarity and support. So that's all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you for being with us at a very difficult time for you and for sharing some really great practical examples of what solidarity and empathy could mean. I'm sure there are many ideas that the festival makers here would pick up with their festivals as well. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Carmen.
Hello everybody. So Festival Academy and Festival Transamérique invited us to reflect if there is or there should be a link between festivals and global themes, and to analyze if festivals have the power to become agents of change. And if that is the case, what place could regional perspectives have a role? I would like to start by positioning the essence of global themes in our life. I ask each of us to make a list of 30 global themes. I believe that probably the first 10 will be the same. And for sure, all of them will have a connection with some existential set. At the beginning of the 21st century, individual and collective awareness of the dangers that life on Earth is undergoing is a given. This awareness has been expanding the last 70 years, and whether we welcome or resist its presence, it has already changed the way we all function. If I say recalculating, everyone understands the reference, and I believe the analogy too, because our lives have become a permanent act of recalculation. Not so much because we choose.
Sorry, Carmen.
Yeah.
Your sound is a little bit. We're not hearing it too clearly.
Oh. I don't know what to do, Mike.
Yeah. Neither do I, Carmen. Sorry. Okay, so apparently you need to speak louder into your microphone. So it's a very technical thing. Speak louder.
Okay. So should I start again?
No, we're with you so far. Yeah, thank you, Carmen.
Okay.
Sorry for that.
Okay. So if I say recalculating, everyone understands the reference, and I believe the analogy too, because our lives have become a permanent act of recalculation. Not so much because we can choose how we can advance, but because we are not so sure where we are going. This is how we face today both everyday decisions and fundamental questions. For example, if we throw away fruit, chicken, and a plastic tray together, and in a voice says, "The world is becoming a garbage field. I should recycle and compost." Or why we truly believe in self-determination of communities, the inner voice says, in an interdependent and endangered world, cutting or burning the Amazon jungle is a decision that impacts all lives on Earth. So, are we sure that individual communities should be able to take that kind of decisions alone? Recalculating means putting us, these type of issues, constantly in context, trying to find sound criteria to address new challenges that humans never before had to face. In the high fields of academia, recalculating has more appealing names, like postmodernity, the end of history, liquid time, reconstruction, acceleration of time, thinking from the rest, and so many more. All ways to try to grab our challenging reality. And also, titanic efforts to differentiate, contextualize, re-signify, reinterpret, visualize, and embody what is going on, what we need to understand to address our new challenges. So, should there be a link between festivals and global themes? The answer is a resounding yes. Even more, there is no need to make a decision because our zeitgeist is characterized for having the global themes related with existential threats as an important omnipresent marker, conscious or unconscious, in all society and all society corners. And thus, we are all linked with them, and any human production can become an agent of change. And for this purpose, art and festivals are spaces of extreme value and service of collective changes because they help us produce narratives and culture. And humans, in order to change collectively, needs exactly that, narratives and culture. But what kind of changes should they become agents of? Let's think. What is needed in order to change collectively? Changes often need, first of all, new questions that can shake the already established perspectives. For changes to emerge and evolve, they have to be nurtured with creativity, new understandings, knowledges, practices, and emotions. Changes also need the ability to understand the pieces of the whole and to create gestalts that can become guiding roads to each step. Art and festivals can definitely contribute as agents of change in all these processes. And finally, in relation to regional perspectives, I believe that they are absolutely essential. The better way to understand why is to position all perspectives in relation to both the role of diversity in human transformation processes and the role of similarities, interdependence, connections, agreements, and any other way of carrying out together massive actions that collective changes demand. Diversity is spread all over the world, and similarities are too. We need to take care and promote diversity, and we need to be able to agree on having some collective identical decisions and actions. We need to bring all available knowledge to the table, the one that comes from science and technology, the one that comes from art, the one that comes from all community practices, and one that once all human beings had. And now only 6% of the population is taking the responsibility of keeping alive and active. How to be a respectful part of life in our planet. We also need to provoke all kinds of creative processes to find new questions, perspectives, and solutions to problems that are putting 8 billion humans in danger. Changing has always been the extraordinary propeller force of humankind. But in our time, changing is also a desperate need for the challenges we face. So how to think about all these needs, mandates, and possibilities? Yesterday, Mike asked if it isn't for artists and festivals such of a burden to have to consider global themes and become agents of change. I would like to share what Ortega y Gasset, a Spaniard philosopher, said 100 years ago in 1922 in his prologue to the first Spanish edition of Einstein's relativity theory. He said, "Nothing could better guarantee us that we are entering a new era. Very soon, a generation will learn from school that the world has 4 dimensions, that space is linear, and the universe is finite. To such primordial intuition will correspond sentiments very different from ours, and a vital pulse of unknown melody. The relativity theory carries a seed not only of a new technique, but of a new morality and a new politic." It's easy to agree with him and to also see that before that particular seed, there were 3 radical others offered by Marx, Nietzsche, and Freud, and after other seeds that came with the new sciences born at the beginning of the 20th century. Quantum physics, sociology, ecology, semiotics, and more came with technology, artificial intelligence, watching the earth from outside, internet. We live an extraordinary time of changes. We have been going from one conceptual and material transformation to another without pause. We have been non-stop finding and producing seeds of change. So the good news is we are already changing. We are the members of the changes generation. And for artists, an essential task is the promotion of creativity and diversity, the nurturing of critical awareness to help these seeds grow and bloom, and to help communities develop collective gestalts of a new morality and a new politic.
Great. Thank you so much, Carmen, for that manifesto for our times. We really look forward to doing an atelier in Latin America soon and having access to much more of the Latin American thinkers that are there that we don't have sufficient access to. So thank you very much for your contribution. Let's go. Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Carmen and Anna, for bringing us into a context of, I think, where we are right now globally, and also postulating what is possible as we think about and speculate futures that we all want to be part of. But first, I want to begin to squarely acknowledge the issue of privilege. I think many of us in this room, or some of us in this room, come from the global majority, and obviously we encounter privilege very differently. Some exist in our own bodies, some exist outside of our own bodies, and some exist in structures that we have no control of. So it's important to think as festival makers, as curators, that where we locate this privilege and what does it mean to us, ourselves, and to communities around us. I've recently moved from Hong Kong after spending 9 years in a city that in the last 4 went through a lot of trauma, a lot of change, a lot of increasing oppression and violence, but also a moment of intense solidarity, a moment of intense celebration of human tenacity, and a moment of invention, creation, and logics that previously we have never seen before in any kind of human communities. And a lot of this was also shared roughly about the same moment around the world, to Chile, to Hungary, to the many cities that are facing different types of oppression. And I think in some ways, you know, we all live in these privileged structures where our lives are controlled and guided by algorithms. Algorithms that dictate what we see, what we read, what we hear, what we can or cannot see, and what we cannot access to. So in that sense, globally, we have been in moments of shit for a long time. Yeah? I met Salim when I arrived in Montreal, my new friend and colleague who comes from Afghanistan. And we were all there when it happened. Now we're all there with Ukraine when it happened. Tomorrow, where will it be when something else happened? But in a way, this sense of privilege also creates a moment of, I think, fractured walls, that because actually it's important to think about globally all the different kinds of oppression that's happening at the same time. No one oppression is more valuable than others. No one oppression is more valuable to speak of at any given time than others. And this, we go back to this question of change. And in order to effect change, I think it is not at festivals that change will happen. It is not through the curatorial muscle that change will happen. It is not through even the artistic process or the artistic project that change will happen. And Carmen has already said this, that it is human beings who will make this change. But how do we get there? What kinds of discussions are we having? What kinds of moments that we want to think about what is possible given this kind of oppression that we're all facing across the world in different contexts, at different kind of time scales. I think it's important to also think about equity. For a long time, we were pushing equality. We still are in some quarters, to talk about equalities between men and women, equalities between queer people and non-queer people, equalities between people of color and white people or whatever. But equality doesn't get us anywhere. Equality only reinforces a lot of the structures that continue to put us in this kind of state of oppression. So we want to talk about equity, and equity is an imagination of something that is beyond what late capitalism is kind of offering us. Yesterday, we heard from Jacob Bohm talk about, from the indigenous perspectives, this other way to reimagine transaction. And it's built on human relationships. It's built on imaginations around kinship, around what I would like to extend as chosen families. We're all in this room and online with you because we've chosen to be here. We've chosen to be with each other. We've chosen to accompany each other in this journey to think about change. So in this moment of choice, we also have many other choices to make. What are we going to do about sustaining the change that we talk about at any moment in time? Today, we stand with Ukraine. 6 months or last year, 2 years ago, we stand with Hong Kong. You know, and then we stood with Chile. We stood with Syria. We stood with, at the time there was no hashtag, we stood with Iraq. You know, we stood with Afghanistan. So this hashtag is only a manifestation of, I think, the kind of world that we live in. The world that operates via algorithms. That you make yourself feel better because you have hashtag something in your like, in your post, in your share. But this is not action. In fact, this is the epitome manifestation of inaction. Because you delude yourself that you have done something because you have clicked a heart on an Instagram post, you have shared a tweet, you have commented something on Facebook. This is no action. This is, in fact, reinforcing the kind of inaction that keeps us comfortable. Because we have ticked the box, because we have said, my friend, I've stood with you. Yay. Bullshit. When we think about change, we think about risk and consequence. So what is this risk to ourselves, our individual, our families, our communities, communities who are our neighbors, our friends, communities who are not our neighbors and friends? What does this all mean for us? So this idea of returning to ancient knowledge and cosmologies, of communities organizing themselves in ways that in our own current contemporary imagination, either we have very little access, or that because we choose to ignore, or worse still, we choose to forget. I think we are all a people living with a lot of amnesia. Wars have happened repeatedly over history, but yet it still happens. Yet we allow madmen and women and all sorts of people in position of power to use the sense of privilege to keep us in where we are. So I kind of feel that as festival makers, it is not our job to think about, what kind of privilege that we can gather in order to showcase the moment of the zeitgeist. But I think it is our job as human beings, in whatever we do, whether we're a curator, whether we're someone who cleans this house, someone who drives the taxi, someone who drives the bus, it is all our responsibility to think about what is possible beyond what is not imagined. And I want to end also by drawing reference to very recently, I was in the same room with my colleagues from the Sami community in Helsinki, in Finland. And she was an academic, and she was talking about the experience of indigenous peoples around the world is always spoken in language of trauma, which is true. Yeah, which is true. We all have encountered trauma in one way or another. But it is important to speak at the same time of trauma, but also to celebrate what is of the human condition that really keeps us what it means to be human beings. So I think we have to be careful of our language. We have to be careful of how we talk about things, that in a way, there's more than two sides of the coin. Yeah? And I feel that even as we come out of a major crisis globally that's just kind of ongoing, the pandemic is only one thing, one additional thing of the shit that we are all going through. So what is it we want to celebrate of each other? What is it that we want to celebrate of communities that are unknown to us? What is it that we want to, bring to the front, of peoples who may be going through trauma, but there's so much more that they can offer and teach us, of those of us who are in positions of privilege. Thank you.
I think people really want to clap. Thank you, Kee Hong. That was such an excellent provocation. Really appreciate it. Orwa.
What?
Speak.
I don't want to. I don't want to just listen to them. It's very difficult to wake up. No, I agree. I agree with everything. And first, hi, everyone. Great pleasure to take part. Great pleasure to... I'm sorry that I'm not there in person. I would have truly loved to be there in person and see everyone and meet a more physical way. I have a bit of a special relationship with the subject of this encounter. I disagree with everyone. That's kind of my definition, my problem since childhood. I agree just with Kee's statements saying bullshit and shit. I fully agree with those. I think it is, to me, I will sound cynical over the coming 7 minutes, and I hope that after the great lack of cynicism that my fellow speakers share, you can take some cynicism. I think I spent my life so far experimenting with festival, art and culture, film in my particular profession as agents of change, as advocacy carriers, as tools for lobbying. My entire experience is a crossover between activism, politics, and art and culture, particularly film. Again, and documentary film, my specialization is by definition in this crossroads between these different languages or paradigms. Now, to me, the question of this morning begins just from saying, so what is it, art and culture? And what is it, festival? How do we get to the place where we really have a strong and concrete, but also dynamic, open understanding of the responsibility towards others, of solidarity, and at the same time still be truly consistent with how we each understand what art and culture are and what a festival can be. This here is a bit of a loophole, a bit of a maze that one can lose oneself in, but it is necessary to me to keep questioning. And it is necessary that my answers to these questions today are very different from my answers a year ago and will be very different a year from now. There used to be a time when we were all praising usually the man who is principled and who never changed their position towards an ethical point. And I think a very clear moment, part of the zeitgeist, is to say, no, I change my mind. I change my opinion. I review and revise my positions, and I challenge and question my own principles continuously, and some of them might truly evolve into things that as a 15 years old me would really be disgusted of. But now I'm not 15, I'm 45, and I have a different view. And I think that everybody has the right to be different. And to me, that's what arts and culture do in this world, not only bring about change in the sense of leading us to a more equitable or a more just or a more fair world, but something much slower and more and further away from direct action, which is reminding all of us all the time that we are many and that pluralism is the nature of humans as well as of arts and culture, that there are no answers that are that should prevail, that no paradigm needs to be seen as the correct one, and when it does, even if I agree with it, it should immediately have loads of red flags around it, because suddenly we all agree about something. There is a red flag when we all agree. Consensus is, to me, a very questionable notion. So when we live in a world where we are surrounded by new terminology, and I do use the term equity, like Kee mentioned, so much more than I do use equality, but every term is being changed. So instead of democracy, there is D&I, diversity and inclusion. Instead of pluralism, there is diversity. Instead of progress, there is development. There are many terms that are being shifted today, and there is a lot of responsibility that comes with that. Now, to go back to our questions, there are themes, yes, justice, equity, pluralism, decolonization. These are reference points in our moment. And these reference questions of our moment, use art and culture directly as their carriers. Art and culture and festivals as platforms or launchpads for these are presenting these ideas and challenging them in our world today more and more actively. And then the question becomes, what is a festival? Is a festival in itself an artistic endeavor? Or is it just a container for artistic endeavors? So this is a moment in history that I find this to be my main question. There has been a paradigm of understanding festivals for a long time, especially in film, but also in other fields, where the job of a festival is to select excellence, is to find and highlight excellence. And this notion of excellence needs to be challenged, because today, if we want to be just, pluralistic, decolonized, and open-minded, it is not only about selecting excellent works that have these values within them, it is also about organizing activities, festivals, that internalize these notions. And to internalize such notions, the question becomes, how can we be deeply pluralistic, decolonized? Then the questions begins, or the answer begins, from challenging the idea of excellence. What is excellent? Who thought and decided this is the definition of excellence? What is the paradigm that is in our minds as curators and programmers of festivals when we watch the works of artists and authors and filmmakers and so on, and then we try to decide which ones of these deserve to be promoted today? And when we do that, we are already tapping into our own histories and our own experiences of what is excellent and what is not. So the most easy way to simplify this would be to say that excellence in arts and culture and in festivals has been defined for decades and centuries now by a particular Eurocentric patriarchal paradigm. And when we want to look at this today, then we have to challenge this question. Is it true that nobody in Central America or Central Africa or Southeast Asia actually really knows how to make a good film, how to write a good novel, unless it is somebody who studied in a British university? Or is it that our own definition of excellence is defined already by paradigms that do not allow the other to break through unless they are conforming? Festivals today, with this definition of excellence, are becoming tools of oppression, tools of unifying, of, what's the word for that? Of just really oppressing the different, oppressing the others, and making them conform into one monoform, one understanding of what good art, what good culture are. And then we do that very systemically without realizing it, without discussing it. But in the middle of that, we hold panels about justice, we hold panels about pluralism, and we call it, of course, diversity, so that it's certainly a liberal term, not a political term. And then we do tribute, we pay tribute to everybody who's being oppressed in the world, and we give them awards. And then we even make panels and talks against tokenism, although actually the tokenism panel itself is actually a tokenism activity in itself. So that to me is the key question here. What is it that we become truly open and truly ever-changing? Then taking the side of somebody is also a question that is of a similar nature. Activism and art are, in a way, very good friends and very good enemies. And this relationship needs to be always examined, because in times of extreme situations, everybody needs to be an activist, and that's totally understandable. But when my home country, when the revolution erupted in Syria in 2011 and the regime started murdering people, mass murdering people, a journalist asked me, so what do you think will happen to documentary filmmaking in Syria now? And I told him, we will have loads and loads of terribly bad films. And I still think it was not a bad idea, but it did produce a historical shift in Syrian film. Syrian filmmakers made great films after that, but there was a moment where everybody was making terrible films because they needed to advocate immediately. They were very pragmatic. All of their film work was all about shouting their victimhood out and telling the world, come to save us, and also shaming the world for not saving us and not acknowledging our victimhood. And then through that, actually, we turned into international nonprofits in a way. Filmmaking became all about public awareness, advocacy, in a sense that is absolutely irrelevant to the questions of art and culture on a historical level. So the responsibility of being a part of the world, of caring for the world, of being in solidarity, does not mean that we are shouting slogans like old school political demonstrations. That is not, probably not, most usually not what makes real difference between a political party and a film festival or an art festival. A festival can contribute to reminding everyone that there is a massive prism for everything, that we do not need to necessarily be in solidarity with someone by murdering someone else, that we can see the whole world as a web, a few networks on top of each other, Foucault would say. And when we see these networks on top of each other's, we realize that everybody is a victim and everybody is a perpetrator, and only art, like the best of philosophy, can teach us that, can allow us to fall in love with our enemy. And that is a key to change so much more than destroying our enemy, which is an absolutely absurd quest. How do I work on this is a very long story, because I know if we had time, Mike would be telling me, so what do you do?
Yes, I'm about to ask you that.
I think it is also, I don't have concrete answers. I only believe that a little drop of cynicism is necessary so that we do not fall into shouting slogans out loud. And we can always remember that what we can do is not to change the votes of the masses in an election. What we can do is to change something much more difficult to change, something deep in the hearts and the ways that people see the world around them, something that is not commercializable, which is our perception of the other and our perception of a world that is pluralistic. That's how I would comment on the question of the morning. And thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. It's a great pleasure.
Orwa, thank you so much for adding huge layers of complexity to the question and for not giving us answers. And I think that that's exactly what these next 7 days are about. It's about asking the hard questions, not necessarily coming up with the answers, but asking the right questions. So thank you very much for that. It's been such a great panel so far. Salim, let's go to Afghanistan.
Hi, good morning. Assalamu alaikum. First of all, I would like to thank the FTA and all my colleagues and organizers of this festival that created this wonderful opportunity for me to be here and share my personal painful stories from the perspective of solidarity. And of course, I would like to share my presentation. I framed with question and will finish with question. Though I will ask a difficult question that I'm looking to find deeper answer from you. And also, Afghanistan was called and was known the land of poetry. That is why, from the perspective of solidarity, I chose a very famous poem from Maulana Balkhi Rumi. He says that, I will read the Persian, then the translation you read yourself. بنی آدم اعضای یک دیگرن که در آفرینش یک گوهرن چه عضوی به درد آورد روزگار دیگر عضوها را نماند قرار. Based on this topic, I would like to focus more on my personal history, whatever I did in Afghanistan, and how was art and theater was received by the local people. So the question starts from here, that how does it look or seem like to reflect my 13 years of art-based activism from here, Edmonton, Canada, or Montreal. Actually, I was born at war in Afghanistan, grown up in Pakistan, and in 2001, when the situation was getting quite bitter, I returned back to my home country and started working with different national and international organizations working. And now I'm forced to continue the rest of my life in exile. After the fall of Taliban in 2001, the situation was getting slowly better in Afghanistan. I think you are more in the picture. Though from the beginning it was lots of questions, difficulties and problems exist. But the local people, the ordinary people, really tried to practice the democracy values in the country. They themselves started to candidate or to vote the candidation and to select their president and to select their representative in the parliament by using their own words. And also they demonstrated in the country peacefully, just to practice the democracy values. And somehow there was a hope. It seemed there was a small light at the end of the tunnel, that we will see a better future in our own life. In 2008, I joined a UN project that the UN supported that project, which was a participatory theater-based project. Honestly, on that time, I was not willing to participate in all theatrical games and exercises and all activities because of my educational and my professional background. As you may know, acting itself, moving on the stage using music for a long time slowly became like a taboo. That's why the people were not willing to do art-based work a lot. Later, on 2008, I participated in a theater of the oppressed workshop or forum theater workshop, and really this workshop changed my life forever. And on that time, I found this methodology one of the best methodology can change the society, and it can create a safe space that all the ordinary people, especially those people who are not very familiar with reading and writing, can raise their voices and can struggle for a practical solution. And then in 2009, the HRDO, Afghanistan Human Rights and Democracy Organization, was found inspired by this wonderful methodology. And this organization, I can say, that was completely different because that organization was a non-hierarchical organization. And all the time, our mission vision was changed based on the people's demands and ideas. And while we were working with the theater of the oppressed in the community with widows and war victims, so there was one widow. Unfortunately, she lost her husband, her sons during civil war. And from the beginning, when I was leading a workshop, she was silent in the corner. She was crying all the time. And it is not very common that women smoke in Afghanistan, because Afghanistan is a very patriarchal society. So she was chain smoker. She smoked a lot. And after 2-3 days, once she came and said, after this time, I'm not going to cry anymore. And one word completely changed our mission. She said that let's change our tears to energy. And based on that word, so HRDO started working with marginalized people, war victims, and widows in the field. And during 13 years of our work experience, HRDO did a wonderful work in the community based on theater of the oppressed and art-based work. So the main focus was in 3 areas. One, the first, human rights or democracy. The second area was transitional justice. I think you are more familiar with the transitional justice, but just for your own idea, I'm not going to focus too much about the procedure itself and which country was successful and which country wasn't, but briefly that this procedure implemented in Rwanda and South Africa and Cambodia, Argentina, so in some other countries. But unfortunately, we started in Afghanistan, but it was almost failed because most of the perpetrators, they themselves were on power, and that's why they were not willing to implement this process. And the third area was peace building and conflict resolution. So my own organization that you will see on the picture implemented many art and theater-based projects in the field in Afghanistan. Mostly the focus was ordinary women, widows. So you see the picture that project was called Legislative Theater for Women's Rights. Really, this project was well received by ordinary people, by women. That in this project, women came together themselves. They discussed different issues and problems that exist in the community, and then they turned it to a theatrical scene, and then performed in the local community, and then collected people's ideas for a better solution. And also we had a lawyer that then the lawyer was taking note and then changed it to law literacy, and later we sent all the ideas to the parliament for the purpose of changing the existed law or maybe add some new things in law.
Salim, 2 minutes.
And also you see some picture that we already were working with theater activity in the field. And also the second area was Memory Box Initiative. That Memory Box Initiative project, it was that most of the war victims, they came together and they worked during 4 or 5 days. They collected their ideas and their instruments which left behind from the murdered people. And then later on that, they themselves created an exhibition in the public space for the purpose of public hearing and solidarity, and also for the purpose of documenting the human rights violation in the country. So later, we collected about 40,000 signatures for the purpose of having a war victims museum in the country, but unfortunately we were failed. And then we turned our office to our victims museum, and then we had a permanent exhibition in the museum. And in 2021, when Taliban came on power, Afghanistan was fall into the hands of Taliban. So we were forced to leave everything behind. I think somehow for me it is very difficult because I was collecting all the memory box instruments, objects, war victims' story with myself. It became like almost my kids. And then with myself, with my own hands, I was forced to bury and burn most of the documents. And so it is very difficult how to feel, how to reflect my feelings on that time, which kinds of feelings did I have. And later, with the support of some national and international organization, we were part of the evacuation procedure. And again, my colleagues tried from the Afghanistan airport. Unfortunately, they were failed. But we tried our own ways, and again, with the support of a national and international organization, fortunately, we could leave the country safely without losing our family members, and now we are in Canada. And again, at the end, so I'm struggling with this question all the time, honestly, and I'm suffering that how to start from the beginning. You know, all the time I'm asking my question. That is why I was willing to share with you as well that how I can get my current energy and my past hopes to continue from life from zero here in Canada. Tashakur. Thank you.
Thank you, Salim. Thank you for being here and for sharing your story with us. Folk, we're supposed to end the session at 10:30. We did start a little bit late, so we are going to continue. And we have one more speaker, and I really would like to give you an opportunity to engage with these amazing speakers that we've had today. So please do get ready to ask questions as soon as Michael has made his presentation. Michael, over to you.
Thanks, and really appreciate it. And I will try and keep this as brief as I can. I won't go into who Global Citizen is and what we do. I can save that for another time. Just to say it's a pleasure to be here just in general, you know, two things about Global Citizen that we're most well known for is the first, we talk about this idea of pop meets policy, and that is really where we recognize to engage people into action, we need to partner with popular culture. And the second aspect that's core to our DNA is really this notion of action being our currency. So over the last 10 years, we've built the Global Citizen Festival here in Central Park. And the only way people can get tickets is through taking meaningful actions, advocacy-related actions. And I guess, you know, just as a kind of brief story to share, going back at the start of 2020, just before the pandemic hit, we had been planning to kick off this idea of this global really rally around the world, where we would have festivals in every city around the world, and, you know, or every continent rather. And one of the cities we were passionate about was Lagos, Nigeria, partnered with New York and bringing the best of African talent around the world and inspiring people to take an action to kick off what the UN had been calling this decade of action on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Of course, when the pandemic happened, within weeks, all those plans unraveled. And as we sat there, I was here in New York, and I would think I was one of the first, certainly amongst my colleagues, friends, family, you know, who got COVID fairly early on. And as we were all sick, you know, ambulances going past, you know, one thing that, you know, came to us was this idea of rallying the world together. And really at the core of that sentiment was really this notion that we were together at home. And it was one of those few moments in time where there was this shared experience that we felt, and maybe it was mentioned before, the need to be cynical, or maybe we were being too optimistic. We felt, could this be the basis of a new way, a new shared sense of solidarity? And so really the spirit behind, you know, we did this globally broadcast event with artists around the world. We had Lady Gaga involved, and we all did it from home. But really the idea of One World Together at Home was written in this idea as, could this be a new way where we're experiencing this together, and could we actually end the pandemic together? Even back then, I remember talking about vaccines. I remember talking about the risk of vaccine inequity. And I remember talking about the idea of vaccine nationalism and hoarding. And we felt, you know, is this actually the moment where the world turns a page and we address this together? Of course, you don't need me to tell you 2 years later that didn't happen. You know, we rallied around that. We did two big campaigns off the back of One World Together at Home, Global Goal Unite. We had everyone from The Rock to some amazing celebrities. Then we went into Vax Live at the start last year, just as vaccines were rolling out across America, and reminding people this wasn't taking place in the rest of the world. And the reality is, you know, what we saw is, you know, it wasn't a new epoch. And in actual fact, the pandemic, and again, maybe we were cynical for believing otherwise, basically reinforced old inequities and old nationalisms. And it was really the place that, whilst there might have been a sense of global solidarity amongst citizens, at its core amongst people around the world, you know, who had this shared sense at its core, we still lived in a world of the nation states. And so, you know, as we approached September last year, we thought to ourselves, do we still try and create this moment to bring people together for 24 hours in cities around the world? And at first it was jarring, because we had been planning on 100,000 people in Lagos, Nigeria. And of course, they couldn't do that at that moment in last year. And we said to a lot of our fellow producers in all of these cities, you know, is this going to be jarring? Because you can have so many people in front of the Eiffel Tower in Lagos or in Rio, it won't be possible. Do we still do this? And the result was a resounding yes. And so we went ahead, that notwithstanding. We found it was important at least to be led by people. And here is a very brief clip of what we were able to bring together.
it's time to make a change, and it starts within.
Together, let's make 2022 the year we end this pandemic and did more to help the world's refugees than ever before.
Let the world leaders hear your voice.
Are you ready for the wake up?
Showing this love and solidarity for others is how we will make a better future.
I think, I'll just say a few closing words and then some questions we grapple with. Always at Global Citizen, we are forever grappling with how do we engage millions of people to enter dialogue on these issues of systemic injustice, while at the same time convert that into meaningful policy action that changes lives, whether it's billions pledged, whether it's reduction in emissions commitment, or most recently with our Stand Up for Ukraine, we didn't feel it appropriate to do a music festival, so to speak, so we did a social media day of solidarity with artists, musicians, cultural creators around the world, which resulted in $10 billion being pledged. And, there are 4 questions, through our learnings, and we've mobilized $60 billion over the last decade, which has helped change through grassroots partners on the ground, over 1 billion lives. But the questions which we grapple with that I'd like to end with, would love people's insights on is really these 4. The first is this, one of the speakers mentioned we stood with Ukraine, we stood with Afghanistan, we stood with Iraq. With respect, I don't know how true that is. And the reason why I say that, Ukraine, it became very easy to mobilize artists around the world. When Afghanistan, the month before, was struggling, and they were saying that they're at risk of half a country going hungry this year, and yet their reserve assets were sat in the US Reserve Bank frozen and couldn't be released, which is owned by the people of Afghanistan. I will admit, speaking to cultural creators, there was one artist who stood up, and that was Core Jam, who said, okay, we're going to take on. But the community was very afraid to take that on, and I think others were as well. And so the question is how do we create, in the way that there was the same outpouring of support for Ukraine, how do we make that a standard for all of these other global crises? Because that's what solidarity is really about. The second one is just as festival creators, how do we genuinely create a safe space for civic engagement, particularly when we're working in communities where particular people's identities might be banned, whether that's LGBTQA, whether it's, xenophobia. How do you juggle being true to yourself as a festival creator whilst knowing that if you go into a community and say that, you might shut down the space for everyone? And this is something we grapple with, say, our recent activists in Nigeria who believe, for instance, passionately in the right to a woman's right to choose, but they say if we go out all guns blazing talking about abortion, we're not going to meet with anyone here. No local artist is going to want to work with us out fear of being cancelled. So how do we juggle that in a way that advances the space in a nuanced, balanced way? The third one is, and this came up a few times, the idea of what does equity and inclusion actually mean? And I feel like this is where us as storytellers have an inherent responsibility. I was at the COP26 climate justice talks, and almost always, not always, but in many cases, I saw advocates particularly from marginalized communities, being used more as props to validate existing prescriptions and arguments rather than genuinely being there to tell their story. So what does it mean as equity inclusion versus validating perhaps policy prescriptions we hold dear? And really the last one is just can, and this is a proposition, and I go back to One World Together at Home, and maybe this is me being naive, is there ever an instance in which popular culture has and can, what I would say, shift the Overton window? And what I mean by the Overton window is there is that moment in time where what was once politically or socially disagreeable suddenly widens and the impossible becomes possible for a brief period in time. It was done back in the Second World War. This is a book I'm holding called The Idealist, Wendell Walker's wartime quest to build one world. And he was the failed Republican presidential campaigner who traveled the world and then wrote a book and did a series of radio interviews about one world. And almost in a space of weeks, support for the United Nations, a change of global governance went up across America overnight. And so my question is could we as festival creators, or is it too much to ask, ever help shift that Overton window overnight to actually address the big structures that we've been talking about and the systemic injustices we've been talking about here? So I will leave that there, and thank you very much for having me. This has been great.
Gee, Michael, thank you very much for that, and for the final questions as well, and also for showing us the possibilities and the need to mobilize at a global level in order to bring about the kinds of changes that we are wanting to effect. So that's it from our speakers. Now it's over to you folk. Questions? We've got about 15 minutes or so. Maybe just to start off with then, as people are thinking, Orwa, I was going to ask you, is it, just to be provocative, is it possible to have both excellence, however one defines it, as a criterion for including works in a festival as well as a commitment to inclusivity? In other words, are these necessarily polarized criteria? Can one have both within a festival?
I think the point is what it the process of selection, and the I think our American friends now call this gatekeeping. And in this level, to me, the question is how do we make this the definition of excellence a pluralistic concept? So in a way, what is excellent to me might be different from what's excellent to you, Mike. And in a way, we might agree or disagree about this or that. And the fact that I could be, or you could be, responsible for making or breaking the careers of artists or cultural people who create cultural products in the world is something that is deeply questionable unless it is a pluralistic process. So to me, the answer to this is yes, but excellence is a multifaceted notion that cannot be easily defined in any way other than pluralism. So there are different excellence from different angles coming from different cultural and artistic sensibilities. And together, we have to learn to understand that we will not necessarily understand why we do not agree, or why is this excellent to Kee or to Salim or to Inge, and I disagree. And I have to train myself to understand that my disagreement here is not the end judgment, that there is validity to the fact that the other believes this is valid, and that I might actually never understand or be convinced, that it is not about me being convinced, it's about me accepting that excellence is a plural or a multifaceted notion.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to, and why I asked the question was because we spoke a little bit about it yesterday, when in the context of First Nations people in Canada being included through their, creative works and their creative practice in a festival such as, for example, Festival Transamerica. Just speaking to one of the representatives yesterday, he was saying sometimes they feel that their work is not regarded as being excellent or of sufficient quality to be included in a festival such as this that has such a great reputation internationally and otherwise. How does one deal with, overcoming colonial and other kinds of exclusions and practices? Is it through curation? Is it that people have been excluded now take part in the selection of the works as well, so that excellence is not the preserve in terms of its definition of one curator or one entity, but that even in terms of deciding what goes into a festival, pluralism needs to be effected there as well?
It is about decision-making process. So it's about the process of assessment, and then it is about the audience. Most of the cultural activities in the world are aimed at the privileged. Most of the audience that shows up, that has the time to dedicate and the money to buy the tickets to go to well-curated, good quality cultural activities are privileged. So there's, in a way, there's a loop here. The selectors are coming from the selectors are representatives of the audience, and we are not working hard enough, I think, on challenging this paradigm and making sure that we do not need to keep reproducing. One simple example came to me, many different times in many different ways, but recently, for example, I had a short discussion because I received the recommendation of a film. So it's a Chinese documentary film, and I'm a big fan of Chinese documentary cinema. Chinese documentary cinema has its own nature. If you're used to a mainstream Western documentary film, you will expect a very energetic plot. You will expect that things will happen, and you wait for the next thing to happen. And that's why you watch, because you are waiting to see what will happen. In most good work coming from China, that is not interesting for the artist behind the film. There is a much different pace, a different rhythm, and a different stamp, in a way, to a majority of the good Chinese work in documentary film. That's what audience might find boring, unless we as festival makers can find the audience and prepare the audience and put the audience in the right moment, in the right state to receive this different understanding of what film can be and how they can enjoy this different filmmaking approach. When I look at it from the other side, I get, for example, a recommendation of a film that says, this is a Chinese film that is one of the rare, very few examples that we get that actually will work for a Western audience. I think you should show it. And the first thing I feel is, so this film was made by a Chinese artist, but then was actually tutored and coached and edited in a Western industrial system. So then I look at a product that is not necessarily hybrid in a good sense, but rather something that takes out all the authenticity and the cultural and the artistic sensibilities of its own maker, and then made into a fit, something that conforms to the prevailing market, which is a Western market. And by that, we lose all authenticity and we lose dialogue, we lose pluralism, for example. So how can I make sure that this superiority that is causing so much problems now, because now, for example, the regime in China and the regime in India are very fixated against Western festivals. They now consider that it's a big problem that they have their works from China or from India have to be judged or valued by Western references, being festivals in the West. Why doesn't the Westerners come to our festivals to get their stamps? And that kind of nationalism that is growing elsewhere, certainly not something that Chinese or the Indian governments are monopolizing, is growing everywhere. Whereas to me, the question is, how can we, as festival, not be just simply Western, or not be just simply Chinese, or not be simply American, but rather be, in a way, truly pluralistic, in a sense that represents a pluralistic world. It's all nation states until now, and they are lashing back against a more international understanding of our world. But that does not mean we do not know that every country in the world almost today is pluralistic, whether the governments or the political parties would like to acknowledge that or not. If we are pluralistic, then we represent our audiences too.
Sure. Okay, thank you very much for that. Michael, I see your hand. I'm just going to go back to our participants. Anybody have a question before I ask Michael to respond as well? Michael, over to you.
No, I mean, this is a fascinating discussion, and it's something we grapple with a lot. I guess my question back is, in order to come up with this sort of pluralistic, you know, I guess, cultured future in which we could generally create, you know, authentic productions and festivals that are, say, Chinese, Indian, indigenous. Given that at the moment, the reason why, you know, movies appeal to certain markets is because it's all driven by where the money comes from and the patrons come from for this. So at the same time, we operate in this world where we have to get funded. And so you see, even with us, I mean, I was not an event person, right? And so when I speak to studio places or producers, they look at me for 10 minutes and they always tell me to dumb it down or simplify. They're like, take what you just said for 10 minutes and put it into a 30-second soundbite. And so I guess my question is how do we change the world of financing that funds all of these cultural productions? Is it that we have to look to new sources of finance? Is it that we have to look to new forms of distribution? Just practically speaking, what is the roadmap to actually get to that future of pluralism that was just being spoken about? Because, you know, all of us that have made festivals have also been in the kind of tension of also trying to get funded, and then you've got your distributors telling you that this is the audience they need. I'm just wondering how we break through that tension and move forward.
Yeah, maybe just to add a layer of complexity as well, so that it's not necessarily only that people with resources are the markets for consuming these particular things, so that we are shaping the programming according to those markets. I think that's very true, but at the same time, take our experience within an African context, for example, where South African filmmakers are making movies, but they simply cannot compete with the Hollywood kind of movies that are distributed there in terms of what the audiences want, because the audiences over such an extended period of time have acquired a particular kind of sensibility and appreciation of how film should be made, because what they've consumed has essentially come from elsewhere. And I think this is the case throughout our continent, where essentially we are consumers of creative goods and services from elsewhere as opposed to producers of our own goods. And so our audiences, our markets, and the people that we want to hear and experience our stories say, well, we don't really like the way that you're telling our stories, even if we see ourselves on the stages. So you've got this other layer of complexity as well. Orwa, did you want to maybe respond to what Michael was asking?
I think it's a very valid question in many different ways. And to me, it is about a key question that defines a festival. And that is, in a way, the festival that Michael is involved with, Global Citizen, is one very particular, very interesting example, because that is about putting the power of celebrity into good use for the causes. To me, there are a whole other line of festivals that come before that, and that is about changing the perception of what is a celebrity and why is this a celebrity, and you know, that is in a way very much in contradiction, although actually on the long run it is not. And to answer the point, I think to me it's all about capitalism and how it made us all start judging things numerically. So success is measured by how many thousands of people watched a film or attended an exhibition or came to a festival. The facts and figures of a festival are the measures of how good or bad it is, or of how valuable it is. But we know that's not how art and culture work. We know that a few books in the history of humanity have changed the whole path or whole track of history because a few read them and they were really changed. And that the whole theater theory, the theory of theater, is against that, because you don't measure a theater play, unless it is a Broadway musical. You don't measure a theater play by the whole city watching it. Not the whole city will go to the theater and attend this play. A few people will, but then they will go home and they will go to school and they will go to their work and they will go to their cafe and they will initiate a civic debate, and a whole city will be engaged in a debate without realizing that play, attended only by 500 people total, was actually the reason why such a civic debate was ignited or was shifted in a particular direction. So to me, the whole fake ambition of getting great facts and figures comes from the challenge of a capitalist approach that is seeping continuously into the world of culture, and it comes together with sponsorship or corporate funding or so on, because these people will need to see the facts and figures to understand that this works, that their logo will be seen by the many, that etc. And in this sense, I think, first answer to me, let's start from wanting less money and then wanting less audience. But the right
Kee Hong, I saw you kind of smiling. Do you want to maybe comment on that?
No, I mean, it's right, in a sense that when we think about these futures, that we all want to be part of, it's clear that we need to redefine the narrative. We need to redefine what are the rules of the game. To continue to play by the same rules, continue to put us in positions of oppression. So in that sense, to speak of wanting less money, wanting less audience is a great start. So in a sense, I think, long ago, our many ancestors never talked about, big money, many. It was understanding what is our relationship to land, to mountain, to sea, to flora, to fauna. Capitalism has put us in this machine that is very clear is not sustainable. Yeah, the pandemic has revealed so many things about, this problem of late capitalism, and I think in some ways, all of us are thinkers in our own right, and it is really about pushing through this, puncturing through this narrative to kind of redefine the conversations, because power will always remain as such. But then the question is, can we kind of transcend beyond this current storm that we are still grappling with?
So it would seem to me that one of the pressures that we encounter within the arts, within a capitalist kind of paradigm, is that we are constantly having to come up with these economic impact studies, right, to show the economic impact of what it is that we are doing. The discussion today is about what is the value, what is the role of festival with regard to fundamental kind of structural change? Can festivals play that role? So it would seem to me that what we might need to come up with is a different kind of impact study. What are the impact studies of a festival in terms of contributing to social change, to social justice, to systemic change? And maybe we need a whole set of different criteria and a different way of doing these kinds of things. But I see, we've got Tobile to ask a question. We're going to make this the final question, then we're going to end this session. Just wait for the microphone. Tobile is from Durban, South Africa.
Thank you. I really love that last provocation, less money, less audiences. And I think I come from a festival that is quite small, you know. Durban is within South Africa is kind of like the forgotten or ugly cousin to Joburg and Cape Town. And for me, I've been thinking along these lines, what if we ask for less? But also in our socio-political context in South Africa, that's a difficult thing to say, right? Because how do we revalue what we give back to the artists? Because for them, that's work, and without that income, that capital kind of injection, how do they continue to do the work that they do? And so my question, personally, because I'd love to implement that, let's have smaller audiences, let's have less money, but how do we ensure that the artists continue to eat with less? How do we, because I think if we can figure that out, we can change the whole world, right? Like, let's figure this one out.
Can I respond very quickly? I mean, I don't think this is a suggestion of the solution, because there should be multiple types of solutions. I think then we have to go back to, you know, what do we mean by care? What do we mean by care of each other? You know? So in a way, yes, of course, resources, finance, money to survive, currently, is kind of still important, yeah? But this is not to say that in the future, this will continue to be important. Kinship is redefined very differently. You know, during moments of protests, people who do not know each other rally around in moments of collective care, or to a certain extent of radical care. So in that sense, I think it's important to kind of think about these, you know, other frames of economics outside of the current definition. So we have always survived as collectives of human beings in all sorts of ways. And in some ways, a lot of it is built around rethinking and reimagining what this care is about. Yeah.
I think it also goes within the South African context as well to one of the campaigns that has been conducted there for a basic income grant. And even within a kind of capitalist kind of paradigm, a basic income grant would do a lot for people who don't have jobs, who don't have work and the like. The problem with the arts sector is that they stand outside of those campaigns. They kind of see themselves, we see ourselves as some kind of island as being special or whatever. And part of the urge is to try to get the arts sector to see their interests as being aligned with the broader social movement's interests as well, so that they will be beneficiaries of basic income grants, which will allow them to kind of do the kind of work that we've been speaking about now. But it is nearly 11 o'clock, and so we are quite over time, but I think it's been a fantastic kind of intervention. I just want to maybe end off by giving each of our speakers a final 30 seconds to say something. Maybe, Anna, you've been listening very patiently there. Anything you'd like to say? And then Carmen, Salim, Kee Hong, Orwa, and then Michael.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. It was very fruitful discussion, and that's a lot to think and to rethink in the future. So I just want to thank you, everyone, and if some of you are interested in Ukrainian art and culture and our activities, please contact me and I will be happy to share. Yeah, thank you again.
Thank you. Carmen?
Well, I think that festivals and actions that have absolute excellency, big or small, great artists giving us a vision, these are pieces of the whole. I believe that every day, the whole planet, incredible millions of amounts of processes, of creative processes, artistic processes are going on. I truly believe that popular theater, popular art, what happens in the communities is an incredible weight, because art is the result, but art is the process, and creativity is the result and the process. And to change together in search of better possibilities for humankind, any place where we can move these things is perfect for me, is of excellence, value.
I have nothing much to add. I just want to listen. I want to listen to you as we continue our discussions, as we imagine these possible futures together with and for each other.
And thank you as well. Just I wanted to add small things. I think it is very important for all of us that we have many ideas in our mind, that how we can put our ideas into action. That would be the important things.
Michael.
I would just say, like, the tensions on display here, I see it time and time again. Just a month ago, I was at this play here in New York. Citizen Wong tells the story of a 19th century Chinese-American activist, and it was meant to push back against the rise of Asian American hate across the US during the pandemic. But the play was only shown a couple of times and then had to end at the end of that. And I asked the director at the end, and he said, for me to continue this and get funding, I would have to change it into something that would fundamentally re-engineer what it was and not achieve the original aim. But that tension that the last question just touched on, and I think you mentioned it as well, you know, this is where these ideas of government care, redefining who looks after universal basic income, if we can change the underlying structures of our economic system therein, maybe that is the way how we resolve that attention and allow these stories to be told in the most authentic. And I think all of us should be looking at how we could advocate each of those policies. But really appreciate, this has been really useful to me, and I wish I was there in person. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Orwa, final word.
Thank you all very much. I just want to close with a cliche. I think the enemy of solidarity, the enemy of impact, the enemy of change making is the commodification of them. So it's very, very profitable today to include something on solidarity with Ukraine. It was great to include something on solidarity with my home country, Syria, before. It was great to do something that makes sponsors, financiers, philanthropies, and the audience feel excited for the connection with the front page of the newspaper, and that brings in cash and it can be catchy in terms of sound bites in news articles, and would raise the interest of podcasters because it is relevant that suddenly what we do is not marginal anymore. It's about the topics in the front page. This commodification is actually about us, and that's its problem. Solidarity is not about me. My solidarity is about the people I'm standing in solidarity with. And the minute I make it about me being good, it loses value. And this is not just in the sense of ancient religious being good definition. This is in the sense of treating our own narcissism, because I think that's how we begin to truly stand in solidarity with each other, when our own benefit of this solidarity is not the subject matter, really, where it is not anymore a performance, but rather standing for real with Ukrainian people, doing the action that is necessary, working in a serious way on supporting the people of Ukraine, rather than showing off that we are standing in solidarity and selling these kind of headlines. This applies to everything, but solidarity, I think, is one of those moments today that everybody wants to commodify, and I think festivals have a responsibility in not doing so. And I wish you a wonderful rest of this atelier, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Anna, Carmen, Orwa, Michael, thank you hugely for being with us. We're going to say goodbye to you now, and we'll just maybe make a few announcements, but it's been really fantastic. Thank you. And then thank you to Salim and to Kee Hong as well, and great to have you here for the rest of the time with us. So.